Hey folks, in this video example we're going to be talking about leveraging Google Places data in MetaLocator. And so we're going to cover a few different topics. The first topic we're going to cover is configuring Google API keys to access the various features and functions in MetaLocator. And then we're going to talk about populating Google Place IDs manually on a per location basis. And then we're going to talk about tools that are available to populate Google Place IDs in bulk. And then once we have these Google Place IDs in place, we're going to talk about how we can then import data from Google, including things like store hours, images, and reviews and ratings. So the first part we're going to focus on is importing data manually, that is editing the place ID on a location by location basis. But before we can do that, we actually need to obtain an API key from Google. And so the first thing we're going to do is go to our Google API project and we're going to make a new key. And so the first type of key we're going to create is the one that's specifically going to enable us to manage place IDs in the back end of MetaLocator. And to do that, we need access to two APIs, the Places API and the Maps JavaScript API. So let's go ahead and make a new key, and that's under Create Credentials API key. And then we'll just call this Maps and Places video so I can remember it. We're going to restrict access to this API key to only a specific website, and that is going to be metalocator.com. So star.metalocator.com/star. So that just means that MetaLocator is the only client that this can be used on. So go ahead and click Done there. And now we do want to restrict this key to use the Places API. And just wanted to point out that in this case, we're just using the legacy Places API, not the new one. And click OK. And then also now the JavaScript, the Maps JavaScript API. And so if you don't see those in this list, you have to go back over here under Enabled APIs and Services and make sure those APIs are enabled in your API project. So Google has a ton of tutorials on how to get access to their APIs and how to create projects. I'm going to skip over that stuff just because there's plenty of documentation available. So we're going to go ahead and click Create, and that's going to give us this new key. And so that is going to be put into the back end of MetaLocator. So I'm going to copy this to my clipboard. And then I'm going to switch over to MetaLocator and then go to my user profile. And under Toggle Advanced Settings, you're going to see a setting in there called Google Places API key. Just paste that in there as it comes. And so that gives MetaLocator access to display the custom field that we're about to create. And so now that we've got that API configured, we're going to create a custom field in MetaLocator that allows us to store and manage the Google Place ID. And so I'm going to go ahead and delete the one I created before this video and start fresh. So let's make a new field, and I'll call that Google Place ID. You can call it whatever you want, but make sure that in the type field you choose Google Place ID. There's a couple options in there. Just make sure you choose Google Place ID, and that is going to be used to store the Google Place ID for every location you have in the system. And so within these individual locations, yours are obviously going to look different. We can go into any one of these. And now under Custom Fields, we're going to see a new compound field called Google Place ID. And so it's going to show kind of an empty map or a default map, and it's going to pre-populate this sample data. And so one thing that will typically happen if you're moving as fast as I am in this video is that it takes about 5 minutes for Google's API permissions to catch up. And so this little error here is an example of that type of delay. And so you're going to want to wait about 5 minutes after you create an API key to do this type of thing, or else you will see like a access denied error. So I'm just going to pause the video here for a few minutes, and we'll reload the page when that error resolves. So now that we've waited about 5 minutes, you can see that that error is no longer showing. And so this control allows you to search for a location. So in this case, this is all sample data, but I'm just going to choose some local pizza joints. And so this is Ian's Pizza Milwaukee. And so I'm searching in this case for places. And so you can type in, any type of term, and then Google will return the place ID for that term. And so in this case, I'll choose this pizza joint and save and close that. And so if I go into these different records, you'll see that the location is pre-populated into this autocomplete field. But in this case, I'm just going to type in different pizza joints in the Milwaukee area. And so that's a great way of manually populating the Google Place ID. And that allows us to manage the Place ID manually, but that obviously has some limitations. And then so in the next section of this video, we're going to talk about how we can obtain the Google Place ID in bulk for possibly thousands of locations. As we've discussed, importing or manually updating Google Place IDs for thousands of locations is very impractical. And so what we want to do is create a special type of job that will populate all of the Google Place IDs for all of our locations. And so what that job does is it searches Google Places API for our locations based on their location, their name, their address information, but then also optionally their phone number. And it turns out that the phone number is a great way of associating a Google Place with a MetaLocator location, because it turns out sometimes Google Places can be co-located, meaning like one specific location could have multiple Google Places in it, and the phone number does a great job of reconciling any differences between those. And so what we're going to do first, though, is we need to create another special type of Google API key, and this one is going to be used only on the for server-to-server communications. And so this one is not going to be used for JavaScript applications, and so it's not going to have any website restrictions associated with it. And so it's really important not to just add additional permissions to an existing client key that you might be using. You want to go ahead back to the APIs and services, make a new credential. Again, it's going to be an API key. We're going to call this one a service key. And no restrictions in the application. But we are going to restrict it to, again, the Places API and Places API new. So one of those is used for populating the Places ID, and then the new one is used for populating the Places data. And so that one is going to have no restrictions and two APIs, Places API and Places API new. So go ahead and create that. This one is going to have the same type of delay that we had with the other API key. As with all Google API keys, there's about 5-10 minute delay between when you create them and when they become active. And so I'm just going to pause the video while we wait that 5 minutes. Okay, our key should be active by now, and so we're going to come back to MetaLocator with the key in our clipboard, and then under background jobs, we're going to make a new type of job. And so that job is going to be the populate Google Places job. And so I'm going to name that accordingly, populate Google Places. And I'm going to specify my key as one of these job arguments, and I have to give it a name, and that is the Google Places API key parameter name. And so this is the way it should look. And then the other thing I'm going to do is specify that when it searches the Google Places API, that it's also going to use the phone number. And so I'm going to go back to that support article and get this parameter name. And that can be one of phone or text query. And so I'm going to use this one, and I'm going to specify phone. And what that will do is make sure that when we search for data in the Google Places API, that we are also leveraging the phone number to make sure that that is as accurate as possible. So now that I have that that job created, I may have a bunch of locations in my data that do not have the Google Place ID populated. So for example, I can come into this MetaLocator location and let's just wipe out, yeah, there's nothing here yet. And so let's go to this, we'll clear out this phone number and go ahead and hit save. And then what I'm gonna do is run this job. I gotta publish it first. And then I'm going to force it. And so that will cause the job to run and go through every single one of my locations and try to identify a Google Place for that location. And so I'm going to go ahead and pause the video while that job runs and we can look at what happened afterwards. Okay, that's completed. And so we'll know that it's completed successfully by saying job completed successfully, right? And so you'll see the name of your job here. If you see this, it just maybe means that you ran it too fast after you created the API key, but also make sure that the API is unrestricted and has those two API access to Places and Places API new. And within MetaLocator now, you will see your Google Place ID populated where it was able to find a match. So if I can go into some of these locations, you can see here, this clarifies that I have this Place ID correctly populated. So you may, though, find some locations that did not get a Google Place ID. This is like fake address data. And so there should be a few of these that did not actually get a Place ID. So let's just kind of keep going down the list. But you'll see some of these that have this word no match in them. And that's a special word in MetaLocator that allows us to identify that, 789 Easy Street Way does not actually have a Google Place ID associated with it. And the phone number was a fake one anyway, so we should expect that a lot of those would not be properly populated. And so you can export this data if you want to review the totality of the Google Place ID population and look at that data in Excel. But now we have Google Place IDs populated for each one of our locations. And so now the exciting part starts where we can actually import data such as hours or reviews and ratings for all of these locations. And so that's what we are going to do next. So again, now that we've got Google Place IDs populated for all of our locations, now we can actually import data from Google Places, including reviews and hours and images. And so I'm going to go ahead and click to Google Places under Locations and Import. And so I'm going to enter in then the API key that was the second one we created, the service key that has no API restrictions, meaning it can facilitate server-to-server communication, and that it has access to the Places API and Places API new. And so a couple details about these options. So you can pull in IDs only, location data only, and then basic, advanced, and preferred. Click on this link to see the difference between all of these. Some of them get quite expensive, so it's really important to kind of know what you're doing here. And you can also place a limit on the number of records that you pull each time this job runs, just to limit your cost exposure. The photo limit is the number of images that MetaLocator will pull down if available from the Google API. I leave that at 0 unless I really need it, because otherwise the API calls become very slow. And so it'll take a really long time for this job to run. In this case, I'm going to choose preferred from the Places details because that includes ratings and reviews. And so that's typically a reason why people are importing Google Places in the first place. So I'm going to also leave this checkbox checked here to keep Google Places data in sync. And what that will do is create a background job that I can use to run this import process on a regular basis. So I'm going to go ahead and hit next. And so what that's going to do is pull down the data in MetaLocator, or pull down Google Places data for the locations that I have Google Places populated for. And so you can see it's just a handful, but I am actually not going to assimilate the name field from Google Places. I want to keep the name field that I have. So I'm going to say do not import on most of these, including name, address, city, state. I don't want Google's version of all this stuff. I want to keep the version that I have. And so I'm just going to go and mark a bunch of these as do not import because I like the data that I already have in the system. And so most cases you're going to be doing this, marking these as do not import. However, like if you don't have hours, for example, you can pull in hours from Google. In this case, there's no image data and there's no gallery image data. Average rating is the average rating from Google. I'm going to allow it to create this as a custom field. I could have also done that beforehand. And then user rating total, I'm going to allow them to create that as a custom field. Average rating and user rating total are special named fields. And so if you do have a custom field, make sure it's called average rating, not my fancy average rating. The reason that's special is because we recognize those as a way of combining them with any manually curated reviews that you have already in the system. This places type, you can map that to a category field. In this case, I'm not going to import it. And then we want average rating, user ratings total, and then all of these ratings fields will be imported directly. And so these are individual ratings and reviews that are available from Google. And so they will just give you kind of a handful of the reviews that they have. So it's going to be variable based on each individual location. But ultimately, you're going to get the average rating and then a couple ratings that are indicative of the general sentiment analysis. And so this is complete. We have the Google Place ID properly mapped. We are ignoring all of these. We are importing hours in this case. We're importing average rating, user rating total, and then the rest of these review fields, we're going to actually import all of those as well. These show that they're going to create custom fields, but they actually won't. So if you hit next, it's going to say we're going to create 2 custom fields. And then we'll do update existing and insert new because we already have our locations. And actually update existing and skip new would be more appropriate in this case because we're only going to be importing data that we already have locations matching up on Google Play, so we shouldn't get any new locations in this case. So I'm going to go ahead and hit finish. And so a couple of these came in with bad hours, so we're just going to skip those. But let's go ahead and look at the data that we've got. So if we go into all records, we should see that we've got some additional information populated under reviews. And so you can see that we've got that data that came in from the review system from Google APIs. And so if you scroll to the, you can see here it's linked to sample location 2. And so that's an example of importing reviews and ratings from the Google API. And hopefully this video has been helpful and comprehensive in terms of describing how the APIs are permissioned, permissioned, and then leveraged in MetaLocator. Thanks.